Last week, Royal Caribbean had its second quarter earnings call, and in that is a lot of boring stuff. But for Royal Caribbean fans, there's a few tidbits of information, things they said that I think are pretty darn interesting. I really want to break this down because it's not so much about, offering any kind of investment advice, which by the way, I'm not offering any investment advice. This is purely an analysis of the call from the perspective of a Royal Caribbean cruiser and what you should know going forward because what they say here has ramifications of how we all plan our cruises and what you could expect in the future. So, suffice to say, number one, demand is very strong. I mean, the business for Royal Caribbean is doing really well. Why should we care about that as not investors? Because that means that demand is high, prices ain't coming down. And that's going to be a general theme we're going to see in this call in general that I got from it. Royal Caribbean is seeing really strong demand, and they're seeing it not only because there's like demand for cruising, but there's demand for Royal Caribbean ships. I mean, Jason Liberty, who's the CEO, talked about the fact that they have such high demand because of really three things that drive it: better ships, better private destinations, and better loyalty, meaning like more loyal customers, if you will. And I think there's truth to what everything he said over there. I mean, that's absolutely the case. He talked about, there's a question about pricing and other cruise lines. I don't know which one they were alluding to. It was either Norwegian or Carnival, slashing their prices to some extent, or at least offering deeper discounts. And they asked if Royal's going to do that, and they said no because it's not what they're looking at. It's not their concern because they have differentiators that go beyond that. Like if you want to get into this, game of like who's got the cheapest cruise, Royal Caribbean's never going to win that game. But what they do have is they believe that they have a better product, which then delivers better value, and that's why prices are, what they are. Now, speaking of prices, they also want something, probably the most interesting thing that came out of this entire call was about last minute cruises. So there's a couple things. There's two major things that came out of this. Number one is that they said shorter cruises are exactly what younger travelers want. Um, a stat that they shared, which we've known about before. I mean, half the people that cruise on a Royal Caribbean are millennials or younger, and they say that younger travelers. And they say this, by the way, this is based on their data, right? So they get this through their post-cruise surveys and other ways that they get information from their customers. And also, this is a macro kind of value. Like, this isn't to say that 100% of their customers believe this, but if 60% of their customers say it, then that means a majority of them, if that makes sense. Anyway, they're saying their data shows that the younger travelers prefer more frequent vacations, and they're willing to spend roughly the same amount on a short cruise as a longer cruise. And that's why Royal Caribbean, as a result, invest in places like Perfect Day, Royal Beach Clubs, and weekend sailing. That's why Royal Caribbean has so many short 3 and 4 night cruises. One of the major changes over the last couple of years is we're seeing many more ships offering short cruises. When I started RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, the ships that were offering short cruises were always like the really old ships. I'm sure there's an old podcast episode you can find here pre 2020 in which I complain, like someone probably said, hey, in an email segment, hey, Matt, I'm looking to go on a 3 night cruise. My first cruise is like, no, because the 3 night cruise used to be like, Enchantment of the Seas and Majesty of the Seas and things like that. And they were just their old small ships. And that's all changed now. Now you're on an Oasis class ship. You're on Wonder, Utopia, and even some of the other ships are offering shorter cruises, not short cruises. But you have all that, and the reality is there's demand for it, and that's where they're responding to it. And that's not to say that there's someone listening, one of you listening, is like, well, I prefer longer cruises. I don't blame you. I certainly plan the bulk of my trips in the year for longer sailings, 7-nighters as an example. But there's a shifting trend where people want that kind of flexibility. And that leads into the other thing about the shorter cruises, which is that Royal Caribbean is selling last minute cruises differently. So, number one, they're seeing a lot of demand. People are waiting longer to book their cruises. They like that flexibility that comes with it, regardless of the fact that price is going to go up. And that's the other thing, is Royal Caribbean sees that, and they're actually raising prices for last minute cruises. Kind of interesting if you think about it. So what this means is they've seen this trend where people are booking, they call it close-in bookings. This is when people wait till, and I don't know exactly what the time frame is on a last minute booking to them versus not, but let's assume it's within 90 days, basically past final payment date of the sailing, And I'm going to assume that when they see that, they're seeing more people start to book at that point. Because let's face it, if you could book a cruise, if you take everything out of the equation, if I could book a cruise, a week or two before the sailing, sure, that'd be great. You know why? Because I can predict exactly like what my schedule's going to look like. You don't have to worry about school schedules or, concerts, dentist appointments. I mean, you know, short of an emergency, you kind of can predict that. When you're a year or 2 years out, I mean, even I would admit it's very difficult to predict what my life is going to look like, what my obligations will be, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they're seeing more people wanting to wait longer to book it, and as a result, they're raising prices, which is kind of interesting because they're doing it, and then of course people are still booking it. So the lesson here is, if you're listening to this, obviously, is number one, don't wait to book a cruise. I've talked about this for a long, long time. The difference, though, is if you literally wait to book your cruise, you're going to pay more for it. It's not, I mean, certainly, I don't think most of our listeners think this anymore, but there used to be a time in which, oh, wait till the last minute, you'll get a past final payment, the prices will drop. But it seems like that's actually the opposite. And of course, there's always exceptions to this. There's not every sailing is always the same. But it is important to remember that each cruise has has its own booking volume and volatility to it. But generally speaking, Royal Caribbean will be increasing the price as you get closer to there. So suffice to say, if you have the choice or you're thinking about it, it's probably going to be cheaper for you to book your cruise in advance rather than waiting until much closer to the sail date. And that's kind of where it is right there. A couple of stats that kind of jumped out at me. Repeat customers spend 20-25% more on cruises, which kind of makes sense. I mean, we know more than the average cruiser. So what I mean by that is not so much like we're knowledgeable, is that we're more aware of what's available, right? Not just like a drink package, but hey, there's this new restaurant, there's this new beach club, there's whatever. We're aware of what's offered. So when you have a good idea of what the full menu is, you might be more apt, so to speak, in order to check that out and do that. And then also, and this is to Royal Caribbean's credit, loyalty programs are generating more repeat cruises. And if you think about it, at least for me, this is definitely true. And I get it. I'm not exactly a typical cruiser, but some of the changes, the points choice, the new Royal One credit card holders. In fact, Royal Caribbean said that a Royal One credit holder are twice as likely to sail multiple times. Um, you know, and the status matching. I mean, all those things. It's not a coincidence that they offered these things. They want to make it as incentivized as possible to try other cruises, and that's absolutely the case. That they want to keep doing that. And then they talk about the fact that like 90% of people use the app, which is not terribly surprising because you're kind of forced to use it, especially for check-in and things like that. But one thing that is true, and this is true of the cruise planner and the app, is that they've been using the AI, but they're using AI especially to target special offers and things for you. They use AI driven suggestions during the cruise, and really it's meant to improve the guest experience. Basically, it's all personalization, right? And that's how they look at it. Now, you can argue if that's improving the experience or not, but that's how they look at it from that standpoint. The other thing about this call that kind of stood out was the Perfect Day Mexico. Now, they danced around this question a lot because they actually led, or near the beginning, with talking about it, because that was kind of the biggest thing that's come out of Royal Caribbean, for better or worse, since the last earnings call, which is the whole, drama, if you will, about Perfect Day Mexico and the back and forth. And, we haven't heard any official statements after everything went down. And what they said wasn't much, but Mr. Liberty did say that they were basically, the original timeline is probably not going to happen, and that was about it. They were asked again some other questions about it, and they kind of danced around. I mean, they really, really did a good job of saying things without actually saying anything, which they're very adept at. But I think suffice to say, there's two things that stand out. Number one, yes, Perfect Day Mexico is not open, almost certainly will not open at the end of next year as originally planned. I think you probably could have guessed that as well. But number two is that, yes, the project isn't dead yet. That's the most important takeaway. Now, they didn't give any details. We've heard there's a lot of possibilities. One is that they're going to scale it down, do something different, right? If you have, this was plan A, now we're going to plan B. Plan B might be a little bit different, less options, smaller, whatever. I've shared this anecdote or analogy before, and that is that with Disney. They did something similar. Disney wanted to do have Lookout Key, I believe is the name of it, without looking up quickly. It's their other place in the Bahamas. They bought the land, and then they got a lot of pushback from the Bahamas about environmental issues, very similar to Royal Caribbean. And they had a lot of back and forth. And then eventually they were able to go ahead with the project, but they had to scale back their vision of it and add other provisions and whatnot. I don't know if that's still the case here with Royal Caribbean and Perfect Day Mexico. That's an option. There's people who speculated they could go to somewhere else. I personally don't see it. But you never know. I mean, they could go to a different place within, whether it's Mexico or a different country. I don't know. But anyway, the point is that this idea is still happening. Now, the question really will be, well, how does it go forward? What will eventually happen? I have no idea. But it is it's their first time they've ever talked about it since all this stuff going down. And I think part of it is probably smart. I mean, if you have a major fiasco like this, the first thing you want to do is put out the fire. And truthfully, you all want to go out there and beat your drum about why you're right, but sometimes letting it kind of, the smoke die down, if you will, is probably a good idea. And I think they're probably playing it close to the vest, especially for that reason. Now, we'll see what happens whenever they come up with a new proposal or a new idea or whatever, but they did talk about it. Obviously, from a guest perspective, yeah, if you were holding out hope to go to Perfect Day Mexico at the end of next year, probably not happening. And by the way, people have asked me, I've gotten emails about this also, what's going on with Royal Beach Club Cozumel. I've heard nothing about it. I mean, nothing, one way or another. I mean, zero, zilch, nada. It is supposed to open at the end of this year. Evidently last quarter, so not this call that we just had, but like earlier this year, Jason Liberty, and I completely missed this, just mentioned, like, oh, by the way, Royal Beach Club Cozumel opening in 2028. But he mentioned it so quickly that I don't know if it's actually the case or he just misspoke. You know what I mean? Like, you ever rattle off numbers or stats or something, and then you accidentally, if you're rattling off a bunch of numbers, it's easy to, mess one up. I don't know if that's the case or not. I truly don't. I did, just as of the recording of this podcast, I did check there's an official Royal Beach Club Cozumel website, which has like FAQ and things like that. It still says 2026. Not that that means anything necessarily, but I haven't seen that 2028 info anywhere else. So I don't know. But the point is that these projects are still happening. But Royal Caribbean typically doesn't share a lot. I mean, with the one in Nassau, that was unique because you literally could see everything that was happening from the ship because the ship docked so closely. In Cozumel, this is taking place where Playa Mia was. And I don't know. I mean, I guess the next time I'm there, I could take a taxi ride over and try to see what I can see. But I digress. The point is that these projects are still happening. But in the case, and this has been really ever since I've followed Royal Caribbean, they like to make announcements when they're good and ready to make announcements, and that typically is much closer to fruition than it is in the early stages there. So we'll see. But in the meantime, Perfect Day Mexico still probably happening there. I mean, overall, it wasn't the most revealing call of all time, but for all of us listening here, the most important takeaway are the prices. They're not coming down anytime soon. Demand is just too sky high for it. They're doing really well from that standpoint, which is good from a, hey, my favorite cruise line isn't going out of business perspective, but also it means any hopes you had for a price drop or a significant price cut, I'm not seeing it quite yet. All right, time for listener emails. It's the part of the episode where I answer emails you sent me. You can always email them, Matt, M-A-T-T, at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, Matt at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. First email, and I moved this one up to the top of the list because I think it's more timely, and if I talk about this 6 months from now, I don't know, anyone cares. It's from Michelle. Hi, Matt. I just had the pleasure of coming across your page on Facebook, quite insightfully informative. I have a question. I'm semi-new to cruising, so part of my ignorance. It's regards to the sailings with Spain. Given the recent news involving Morocco and Spain, the safety advisories for residents and tourists, could this affect future sailings? Is Royal Caribbean likely to cancel any Spanish stops, considering that safety is becoming a bit of a concern? That said, my thoughts are with everyone affected. I'm simply trying to understand what to expect if the situation changes. I'm just a bit concerned for my folks. Pennies for your thought, Matt. It's a good question. And listen, I understand that because, if you weren't following news, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago? There was, Spain has called an overseas territory. Spain has a territory on mainland Africa, which is really what we would call Morocco. And they have a small little territory that they got, I don't know, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And it's not actually on mainland Europe, it's in Africa, but it's their territory. And basically, a bunch of people crashed through the gates, right? And we're not going to get into the details of all of that stuff, it's not important. But it got a lot of attention because basically a bunch of people, crashed the gates and it got attention there. Number one, no, I don't think it'll have any effect on cruises. Number two, it's while there are always, I think the media made a bigger deal of it than it probably should have been because it was a bit of a spectacle. But no, I really don't believe it'll have any change there. Royal Caribbean, and I could be wrong on this, they only offer cruises to two well, let me rephrase that. For Royal Caribbean International, when you're talking about the cruises in the Western Mediterranean, primarily you're talking about Barcelona and Palma de Mallorca. Palma de Mallorca is an island in the Mediterranean, so it's not even attached to anything there, so I don't think that's an issue at all. And then you have Barcelona, which is a major city, but it's also about as far in Spain as you can get away from the area we're talking about over here. It's in the northeast corner, very close to France. Do I think it's a concern? No, not at all. I don't think you should worry about this. It's almost like I'm gonna steal. This is not my response. Somebody else put this out there. It's like saying if there's a wildfire in LA, does that mean you should cancel your visit to New York? A bit of an exaggeration, but you get my point, or their point, whatever. That just what happens in one part of the country doesn't affect the entire country necessarily. And in this particular scenario, I don't think you'll have any concern about that at all. Now, yes, there are Silver Sea as an example. I was on Silver Sea. We did cruises down the Spanish coast. In fact, we were as close as Gibraltar, which is literally, you could see the area we're talking about over here. But things change a lot, and the news loves to report on the bad stuff when things have initially happened, and then they rarely follow up on it going after that. So, Michelle, here's what I would tell you. I would say if you have a cruise, certainly on a Royal Caribbean ship that visits Barcelona, Palma de Mallorca, I would not worry about it at all. I certainly don't expect them to make any cancellations, short of a huge change in, the situation. But as of right now, as recording this podcast, I'm not predicting the future. I'm just sharing what we know now. I don't expect any changes over there. Next question is from Mimi. I'm a single mom and I have to travel with a lot of my kids. I've taken them on 5 cruises in the last couple of years. We just got off an 8-night symphony cruise on Sunday. We always stay in the same stateroom, myself plus 2 kids, currently ages 12 and 14. I've been following you for a while and heard you mention many times the benefits of booking 2 cabins when traveling with your kids. I would love to be able to do this, especially now that my daughter's 14 and monopolizes the bathroom. And Mimi, yeah, I'm with you on that one. However, since I'm the only adult on the reservation, I don't see a way to book a second room. Do you know of any workarounds on this? Yes, actually there is. So technically you're right, but technically you're wrong. What I mean by this is, so Royal Caribbean does have a rule, and I'm very aware of this. If you book the room, Mimi, for yourself, you're the adult. Okay, so you get a room, cool. You can book minors in their own cabin if they are either adjacent or connecting or across the hall from you, but it has to be like 1 cabin away. It can't be like, well, this one's 3 cabins away. That doesn't work. But you could book them that way, as long as they're either connecting, so literally a connecting door in between the two, adjacent means they're next to each other but don't have a connecting door, or across the hall. Royal Caribbean will allow that, even though they are minors, and that would work there. So, and in this case, I would also say work with a good travel agent, because sometimes you call Royal Caribbean, they're like, they might not be aware of the policy, but I can guarantee you that's a policy because I've taken advantage of it many times. Next email's from Nick. Hey Matt, what's up? My wife, kids, and I sailed on Allure this past May. I spent very little time in the casino. I'm talking, I went in with $100 and only lost $20. Boo for me, right? Well, 2 weeks after this cruise, I received an email from Royal Caribbean advising me I won a free cruise through the casino rewards. I'm not a gambler, and this is probably the most time I've ever spent in the casino. Fast forward, I took advantage of the offer and booked a cruise for my wife and I for December. Not long after booking, I received another email from Royal Caribbean advising I won another free cruise through the casino rewards. We haven't cruised since that last cruise in May. How in the world is this possible? Well, this is the mystery of the casino program, and it's hard to quantify this to other people because it is anyone's guess as to how you get an offer, Nick, versus somebody else who doesn't get an offer and gambled way more. There's a black box that we're not aware of that determines all this stuff. And Nick, I have no idea. I mean, listen, I have gotten very few offers in my time, and I gamble. I can tell you this much: I've gambled more than you have on a particular cruise. In fact, I'm recording this episode on Legend of the Seas, and I've gambled more. Please, I don't gamble thousands of dollars, just a couple $100, right? So, but doesn't mean I get any more offers. In fact, I've rarely gotten mailer offers. I can't think of the last time I got one. Anyway, the point is that it is very much a guessing game as to how it all works. I mean, part of it to me is just I'm thinking, they saw you go into the casino for the first time. It's an incentive. They're trying to incentivize you to be like, all right, maybe I should do that, And then you go on this, quote unquote free cruise, and then you, inevitably gamble some more. And it's a business. And then part of it is rewards, and part of it is a way to drum up business. And I will tell you this much, even if you had the most fervent gamblers in Royal Caribbean on here, right? They would all tell you the same thing. It's anyone's guess as to how there is not a if A then B then C kind of equation. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, I wish it was the case. It'd be a lot easier to understand it. Next email is from Mason Leach. Hi Matt, just watched your podcast video on double points. I'm trying to get some friends to go on a cruise with me, and I'm trying to figure out which option is better. Oasis, 7-ish night Caribbean cruise to Coco Cay, or similar on a smaller ship. This would be their first cruise, and I want them to do it again and love it. However, Oasis class is a decent amount more expensive. What do you think is a better option? Boy, this is a great question, Mason, because I can go back and forth on this. Here's the thing. Yes. Do I agree with your premise? An Oasis class ship is more impressive for a first-time cruiser. There's more to do. It's newer. It's better. Blah, 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 blah. That being said, plenty of people have started off on smaller ships and still love cruising. I'm one of them. I started on Explorer of the Seas, which wasn't a small ship by any means, but people, love cruises for different reasons. And it's not to say that if you take them on a smaller ship, an Enchantment of the Seas, a Radiance of the Seas, that they would have a bad time or not love cruising. It's six of one, half a dozen of another. So should you feel obliged you need to pay more in order to attract them to the cruise? No. But is there, depends on their personality also. That all what they're looking to do. Ultimately when you're on a smaller ship, the benefit is here, number one, it's cheaper. So that can endear a lot of people to cruising, number one. Number two is that people that are new to cruising don't mind just having, they don't know what they don't know. So having access, to the main dining room, Windjammer, a park cafe on the pool deck, and access to, some great pools and great places to visit, they'll love it for those reasons, right? So it's not to say that you have to have a big new ship in order to have a good time there. It helps. But it's, in terms of what's the better option, I wouldn't overspend. Let's put it this way. If they can easily afford both, sure, go for the Oasis class. But if you're going to say, hey, we should go on this ship, an Oasis class ship, but it's going to cost them like way more than they were looking to spend, you don't want to start off the vacation before they even get on board already. They're hemming and hawing because of the price. It's out of their range or whatnot. So, yeah, I feel like that's the that's maybe a consideration there. Next email from Ken. I was watching your last month's video about 16 secrets Royal Caribbean to tell you, and at 1 minute 12 seconds of the video, you mentioned that some people book 2 cabins. Do you mean that someone's traveling as a solo passenger could book 2 separate cabins on the same sailing and thus earn twice the amount of points as long as they're willing to pay the cost of 2 cabins? No. So I apologize for not explaining this better. This strategy works. They book 2 cabins, but not under their same name. So in this case, Ken, if it was you and me, we would book. Let me make better examples. This makes a lot more sense. If it was me and my wife, I would book one cabin. My wife would book another cabin. The advantage of this would be that since I have more Crown and Anchor points than my wife because I've sailed more than she has. If I book a cabin by myself and my wife and my kids are in a different cabin on paper, I would earn more points. So that would catapult me to a higher status faster. Does that make sense? Like I would get, assuming I was back in, Diamond or I went Diamond Plus, that's a strategy there. Matt cannot book 2 cabins under Matt's name. It doesn't work that way, and you certainly wouldn't get any double points for that one. It's more about booking yourself on paper alone, so you get more points and thus get to a higher status faster than if we didn't do that and we just booked my wife in the room. So, hope that answers that email, and I apologize for any of the confusion on that one. Next email is from Tony. We just booked a 5-night cruise on Harmony this season in late February of 2027. We decided to splurge for a 1-bedroom owner suite. This is our first real suite, as we usually cruise in a balcony cabin or occasionally a junior suite. We took advantage of the double points promotion, and after you alerted me to it, thank you for that. After this cruise and a transatlantic on Legend in fall of 2027 will be Diamond. My questions are about Coastal Kitchen, so I've never been there before. Number one, is this something that people in suites do for every meal, especially dinner, every night of the cruise, unless they go to a specialty restaurant? Do people in suites ever go to the main dining room? The answer is yes, they go to the main dining room as well. Some people will only eat a Coastal Kitchen. I don't know if that's like everybody. I treat Coastal Kitchen as another option. There are some nights the menu, like Coastal Kitchen day one menu, is better than the main dining room. But there are other main dining room menus in which they're better over there than the Coastal Kitchen. I think most people mix and match. Some people will simply say, well, I'm in a suite. I'm going to go to Coastal Kitchen every night because it's available for me there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of like a second main dining room in that regard. But I don't think, your question, do people in suites ever go to the main dining room? Yes, absolutely. Number two, do you need to make a reservation at Coastal Kitchen? Yes, you do. In order to make a reservation, you can, there are two ways to do it. One, you can, when you get an email from the suite concierge before your cruise, which will happen probably about the week of the sailing, 3-5 days beforehand, you can email them back. They'll send you a generic email. Welcome aboard. This is what you can expect. And then you can ask them to make reservations. You can do that. The other thing you do is when you get on board the ship, go to Coastal Kitchen and make a reservation. You can eat there without a reservation, but it does get very busy. And as I mentioned, I'm recording this on Legend of the Seas. I went there on day one in order to make a reservation for the first night. Great. I go to my reservation, and there was a family ahead of me who didn't have a reservation, and the maitre d' there had them sit down in the lounge and wait because they needed to wait for a table to open up. So you definitely should make a reservation, and only for dinner, by the way. You don't need a reservation for breakfast or lunch. It's not that important. And then basically you make a reservation for every night you'd like to. And is it open for lunch on embarkation day? Yes, it generally is open for there. I don't love the lunch menu. I think the lunch menu is I think it's the weakest of the three menus they offer. I think dinner's the best, followed by breakfast, and then lunch, but it is an option for you as well. So thank you, Tony, for that email. And our last email today is coming from Stuart. Need to find out if we needed reservations for 7 people for a 5 to 5:30 dinner in the main dining room on Oasis of the Seas, and how we can do this, 5 adults and 5-year-old, 3-year-old as well. For the main dining room, depends on how you booked your cruise. If you booked traditional dining, then you already assigned your dining time. You don't need to make a reservation. But if you booked My Time dining, you do need to make a reservation. Now, that being said, Stuart, if you booked My Time, you can't do 5 o'clock or 5:30. The earliest is usually about 6:30 or so. So you'd want to switch to traditional dining at the first seating, which is right around that 5 o'clock time or so. In order to do this, you need to, if you booked with Royal Caribbean directly, you need to call Royal Caribbean, or your travel agent if you booked through a travel agent there. So thank you for the email, Stuart. Thank you for everybody for checking out this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog Podcast. Of course, you can email me your questions, Matt, M-A-T-T, at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, Matt at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.